Take it off. You don't have your sound on. You don't have your sound on the computer.
I can't hear anything.
Thank you.
Paske the adu ale ema it done. So what about all the different things that happened? The too much rain one week, the not enough rain another week, perhaps the hail that occurred or standing water that occurred. All of the things that could go wrong, or fakert, beautiful sunny days, or all the things that could go right with the grain.
I just asked you, why are we talking about the grain? It's not the grain being judged.
Yes,
it's
it
man.
is.
What does the grain do? Does it make a sin?
No.
It's man being judged.
Man eats the grain.
God made, look, you're correct. It's man. But God makes specific judgments concerning produce.
Okay.
At Sukkot, are we going to have too much to eat? Are we not going to have enough to eat? Are the farmers going to have so much grain that the price plummets and they're not going to make a living this year?
But it's a judgment on man.
No, it's a judgment on grain. It's related, obviously, to man. Man is the one that processes and eats the grain.
If you have a big drought.
But it's specifically a judgment on grain. And we're going to say in a minute, I'll jump the gun, that's why we bring the Korban Omer. So God will say to himself, Kaviyachal, here are these Jews. I haven't even decided yet what's going to be good or bad with their grain, and they're giving me the beginnings of their harvest. So in that schus, I'll cut them some slack. So obviously, it's the relationship of man to his grain, but nonetheless, the judgment is on grain. So the Gemara says, Ella. Maybe what we're talking about, I'm sorry, Kohani the Harpaski, Daidu, Allah, Amos, Itron. So everything that was related to last year's crop, 9/10 of it, 99% of it, whatever the number is, was already happened when he judges the grain on Pesach. So we have to say, Elatfua, Dora. So what he's forget this year's grain. He's judging next winter's crop. He is predetermining all the efforts the farmers put in, all their hishtadlus, notwithstanding, the end result is in God's hand. Now, Bob, we say this regularly. You are obligated to do your hishtadlus, but the end result is in God's hand. So that's the context in which we say God judges the grain. So, Lememra, the Chad Dina Misdana. So are we saying that the grain from now until it gets harvested gets a free pass? There could be a hailstorm during Pesach. We can't say that the judgment for now is only on the future grain until next Pesach when the following year's grain is judged, because that means that the standing grain gets a free pass, Kaviyachal, from now until it's harvested. So, Lememra, so what we have to conclude, that that was, I said that already. Desanya, we have a brisa that says, Tvua she'eraba kri o oines. Anytime something goes bad, kri means a problem, and oines means a human-caused problem, like soldiers march through your field and trample your wheat. Koydem HaPesach, that judgments for the things that happen during the growth of that crop before Pesach are sort of judged also. Bedin Nedunis La'avar, that was decided last Pesach. So everything that happens bad or good to your wheat crop was up until this Pesach was decided last Pesach. la'achar Pesach, but any bad things or good things that happen to your crop from now till harvest day, nidunis haba is judged this Pesach for the future of that crop. Okay, so now what's all this got to human beings? Adam sha'arabo keriorones, anything that is a natural calamity, illness, a fall, that sort of thing, oines, or that is due to human interaction. Somebody punches your nose, Rahman al-Islam, somebody is murdered. All of that, kaidem Yom Kippurim, if things of that nature, both natural occurrences and man-related occurrences happen prior to Yom Kippur, Nadun Sha'ovar. It was based on God's judgment on Rosh Hashanah a year ago. No, okay, but La'achar Yom Kippurim, if it happens after Yom Kippur, Nadun Lahaba. It's a judgment of this year going forward. Okay, so Omer Rava, Shmamina, Tre Dine, Misdana, that crops get a double judgment, a backwards judgment and a forwards judgment. So Abaya says, you know what? If that's the case, I got a great idea. Omar Abaya, Hilkach, therefore, Ki Chazi Inish, the matzlach zara afla, if a fellow sees that his wheat, a slow-growing crop, which he planted way back in Cheshvan, is doing well, like the plants are beautiful, it's Kislev, everything is great, so he should quick hop in a barley crop because he has like futures, early indicators that his crop's going to be really good this year. Lekadem lezera harfa, he should hurry and plant a little early, slow the more rapid growing crops. Da'ademote midaine. So by the time Pesach comes, kadim salik, it will be mostly completed its growing. So this is just a practical eitzah that Abaya gives the farmers. And in modern world, we see this where the farmers pay a great deal of attention to projected weather reports because they can, if they can get a glimmer of what's going to be in the future, it's very important to them. It's financially significant. So Abaya is giving that kind of an eitzah to the farmers of his time. Okay, so we got rid of the wheat. Now we want to know who wrote our Mishnah. Now remember, I said it's very significant that Yom Kippur is left out. So let's quickly review. There are 4 occasions during the year where the word nodun, the word is judged, is used. So Mani Masnisan, who is the Tana who wrote this Mishnah? Lo Rabbi Meir, it can't be Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Yehuda, Velo Rabbi Yossi, Velo Rabbi Nasa. None of the normal character, the typical authors of Mishnayos could possibly be the author of this Mishnah. Why not? The Sanya, we have a brisa that explains Hakol Nidunin B'Rosh Hashanah Divrei. Okay, the Sanya called Nidunin B'Rosh Hashanah. Everything is judged on Rosh Hashanah. V'geizer din shelahem nechatam b'Yom Kippurim. God makes a preliminary determination on Rosh Hashanah, and then he closes the books. It's finalized on Yom Kippur. For everything. Okay, for everything. Divrei Reb Meir. So obviously, it doesn't have 4 times in the year. And the process is a 10-day process from Rosh Hashanah to Yom Kippur. So our Mishnah cannot be Reb Meir. Rabbi Yehuda Omer Hakol Nodin B'Rosh Hashanah The Gozer din shalehem nechtam al echad v'echad bismanai. Rabbi Yehuda is closer to the Mishnah. He says the preliminary determination is made on Rosh Hashanah, but God thinks about it for a while, and he declares the final decision on water at Sukkot, on grain at Pesach, and fruits in Shavuos. Okay, so Pesach ala Tavua, Batzeres al Peres Elon, B'chag Nodin alamayim. Okay, the Adam and human beings, Nodin b'Rosh Hashanah, v'Gozer din shelo nichtam b'Yom Kippurim. Human beings are judged on Rosh Hashanah, and the decree is finalized. The books are closed on Yom Kippur. Your question?
Right, so can't you say that
In any event, Yom Kippur, Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda could be interpreted as being the Mishnah, but he adds Yom Kippur. So that's problematic if he's the author of the Mishnah. Rabbi Yossi says, I don't like this 4 times a year stuff. People live their lives on a daily basis. They make good decisions. They make their bad decisions. Rabbi Yossi Omer Adam Nodim V'chol Yom. People are given daily bechinas. Shenemar v'tifkedenu la bekorim. They get a spot quiz every morning. God looks around, checks you out every morning. What'd you do yesterday? I know people who even Basman Hazeh have a notebook, and every night before they go to bed, they make a din cheshbon, and they make notes. This is what I didn't do so properly. This is where I might owe a chatas. This is where I'm not so sure. I might owe an asham, and they keep a record. So that if the Mashiach comes before next Yom Kippur and the Beis Hamikdash is rebuilt, he'll know what Karbanos he owes. And that is what this is sort of suggesting, that you have a daily judgment. And if you examine yourself first, God will be less critical in his examination of you. Reb Nosson goes even further. Adam Nadin B'chol Sha'ah. People are judged minute by minute. Shenemar L'regoyim Tivchonenu. Momentary bechidas. Every single minute, your behavior is analyzed by the Rebbeinu Shalom. So in any event, we have 4 opinions that are not consistent with the Mishnah. The Chitem Eliyayim Rabbi Yehuda, if you say, all right, forget about Yom Kippur, but it's really basically Rabbi Yehuda, the Chitana Misninsin, and when he teaches the Mishnah and uses the word Nadan, Gezar Din, he's talking about the final decree. But that the grand jury investigation, so to speak, could have happened on Rosh Hashanah, the final decree, and that's what the Gemara means, the Mishnah means. But if that's the case, if Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot are final decrees, then what about Yom Kippur being the final decree on Rosh Hashanah? The Mishnah is inconsistent internally. So that's a problem by Reb Yehuda. So the Gemara says, no, we have another author who is very, very much the same as the Mishnah. Amar Rava, Hai Tana Debei Rebbe Shmuel. Every yeshiva had a Rebbe who was a Baki in Mishnayos. And he would, if he would recite the Mishnayos. What's that Mishnah in Maisros? And he would rattle it off. So that fellow is unnamed here in Rebbe Yishmael's yeshiva, Tanav Be'Reb Shmuel. He teaches this following brisa in that yeshiva. Ba'arba prokem ha'oilin nadun. The world is judged 4 times during the year. B'Pesach al hatfua, b'Tzeres al peres ha'ilon, b'Chag nadunin al mayim. V'adam nadun b'Rosh Hashanah v'gazer din shelo nechtam b'Yom Kippurim. And a man is judged on Rosh Hashanah, but his decree is sealed on Yom Kippur. V'chi detani mas Nisan, and when our Mishnah leaves out Rosh Hashanah, it's
Yom Kippur.
because leaves out Yom Kippur. Es aschilas din. In each of these cases, he's talking about the beginning of the judgment process, and therefore Yom Kippur is not a conclusion. And therefore, it's not mentioned in the Mishnah. And whoever wrote this brisa could be the author of our Mishnah.
Why don't we mention animals? Why
Right.
why aren't the animals judged?
I can't tell you, except that humans don't have as much control.
Okay.
And what we're really talking about here is weather. Weather. That's why we start saying Mashiv Baruch the Geshem. That's why we sing the same Talamoter, because we acknowledge that the Rabbanu Shalom is intimately involved with the weather.
Mhm. But it did
And-
talk about man's judgment.
Okay, I can't give you a better
Okay.
answer than that. All right. I mean, I never saw that. I didn't see anybody ask that question, so I can't quote a Rishon or something.
You could actually say it's from Shema.
What?
When the vegetation does well, the animals do well. When it's not the
Okay,
Isa,
so
there's
it's
no
the whole ecological system is interrelated.
Mhm.
Very good. Okay, Omer Rav Chisda. Let's go back now, and let's go back to the various opinions. And how come Rav Chisda? How come Rav Yossi talks on about daily judgments? My time of the Rav Yossi. The Gemara says, my time of the Rav Yossi. Kada Omer time. We already gave his reason. He told you his opinion. He gave his reason that man is judged every morning. Listif kedenu lebekorim. There's a test every morning. So he says, no, that's not what I really meant to ask. Anan hachika amrin. And here's what I really meant to ask. My time Allah Omer Kirib Nasan. Why, if he's going to say the judgment is continual, why does he say daily rather than every minute? So what he probably means is Reb Nosson is that God takes a casual glance minute by minute at how you're behaving. It's not really like a din Torah where you weigh both sides and you come to a decision. So Pekida Nami Inui V'Almahi. But a spot quiz is also a more casual process. It's not a regular judgment. So instead, we're going to quote a pasuk, and we're going to use the pasuk as the basis. Ela Omer Rav Chisda. Rav Chisda sort of answers his own question. Taimi de Rav Yossi mihacha. Rav Yossi gets it from the following pasuk, and this is a pasuk referring to King Shlomo HaMelech, and the Jewish people at the time that the first base of Mikdash was built. La'asos mishpat avdo, he judges his servant, that's Shlomo. Umishpat amo Yisrael, devar yom b'yomo, on a daily basis. And that's the basis on which he says daily basis. Now we're going to quote something that we said earlier. If the king gets judged first and then the people get judged, what's going on? Omer Rav
But here
Chisda,
he's saying that the judgment is at all times, other than just the morning.
If there's a din Torah for the king and a din Torah for members of the community, Melech nichnas tchila ledin. The king gets called into the court first. Shenemar lasos mishpat avda, because it says he judges his servant, meaning the king, first. Mishpat Am Yisrael, and then next comes judging the people, Jewish people. My timer. Why would you say the king has to go first? So the Gemara gives two possible reasons. Boys aim lav orach ta'ara mis the mace of malka aburai. It is sort of bad manners for the king to be sitting out in the hallway while the other trials are going on. You know, you got a parking ticket, you have to sit there for a long time. We also know that often the judge starts losing patience, and he gave other people a $20 fine. By the time they call you, you get a suspended license and a $250 fine. So Gemara says that's the other possibility. V'bois ema mikame deleif shulcharon af. Let the king get judged before God gets too angry. Okay. Amar Reb Yosef, Kaman the Tzalelina ha'idna akatsire va'ariye. What if this is like a hashkafa dika question? If man is judged on Rosh Hashanah and his din is sealed on Yom Kippur, so if he gets sick in January, that was predetermined. If he goes bankrupt in March, that's predetermined. If his wife throws him out in August, should he make a kiddush? What's the deal? But the point is, if everything is predetermined, what's the point of prayer, he asked. Command the Salin and Ha'idna, what's the point of praying today? Akatsire va'ariye, for people who are sick and people who have problems, who are weak. Command the Rebbe Yossi. The reason we pray on a daily basis and we say Rafa'enu in our Shemona Esrei, we say Barech Aleinu in our Shemona Esrei, we say Redeem us in our Shemona Esrei. We ask a whole bunch of petitions, essentially saying to God, please change the din from last Rosh Hashanah, make things better. So why is that? Commander Rebbe Yossi, the way Rebbe Yossi said, and that we get judged momentarily. So the judgment for what you do now or daily, so the judgment for what you do now might not be till tomorrow, and you have a chance to influence God today. The Iboy same, another possibility. Really it's going according to the Rabbanan. The Rebbe Yitzchak, and the Rabbanan choose the opinion of Rebbe Yitzchak, the Omer Rebbe Yitzchak. Yafa tza'aka la'adam. It is good for a man to cry out. In other words, prayer is meaningful. Ben kaidem gizar din, ben la'achar gizar din. Doesn't matter if it's before the judgment is decreed or it's after the judgment is decreed. God listens to prayers, takes them into account. And we're going to learn now, later in a little bit, that there are ways of affecting the din, specific ways that you can change the din on you, or Reuven can change the din on him, or Shimon on him. Okay, going back to the 4 times a year now. Tanya, we have a brisa. Omer Rabbi Yehuda Mashum Rabbi Akiva. He quotes Rabbi Akiva. Mipnei ma amra Torah heviu omer b'Pesach. Why does the Torah tell us to do the first cuttings of barley should be brought as a korban on the second day of Pesach. Mipnei shehapesach zman tevuahu. Because grain is judged during the Pesach time. Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God says to himself, Kaviyachol, Heviu lefanai Omer b'Pesach. They bring me barley grain as a sacrifice on Pesach. Kedei shetisbarech lachem tvua shebesodos. And it's connected with a blessing for the grain in the fields. Umipnei ma amra Torah heviu shtei lechem batzeres. Why does the Torah prescribe the specific korban of the 2 loaves of bread on Pesach? Mipnei on Shavuos. Mipnei sha'atzeres man peres ilanhu. Because trees and fruits of the trees are judged on Shavuos. Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu, God says to himself, Kaviyachol, Heviu lefanai shtei lechem batzeres. They bring me 2 loaves of bread on Shavuos. Kedei she'yizbarchu lachem peiros ha'ilon, so that the trees will be blessed and will be fruitful for them. Now, I don't see a bunch of hands popping up. Why is it bedafka? There we go. Why is it bedafka lechem? This is the first wheat being brought since we stopped before last Pesach. So there are 2 answers given. One answer is that they were also brought the Bikurim. They brought their first fruits, and the Torah is using Shnei Lechem as the identifier of the unique korban, the way it brought Omer. And the other answer given is in the Gemara in Sanhedrin. Rabbi Yehuda says that the product that Eve ate and brought to Adam and talked him into eating was wheat. So it's a peri in that sense. We translate it usually as an apple, but it was a peri. And wheat is sort of tree-like in terms of the way it's treated halachically. So that
The simpler answer would be that, yes, we brought the Omer, which is barley and Pesach, but the wheat, which is the first crop of wheat that we can eat, it's the Chodesh, the Bikurim, we bring.
Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu. Now, what about, okay, Umipnei ma Amar Torah nas kumayim b'chag, that why does the Torah say you always with Kabbanas you bring wine? But on Sukkot you have this special ceremony of pouring. We have a whole bunch of Gemaras on that, and the ceremony and the joy that accompanied the Nisach HaMayim was considered like beyond anything we can experience. Gemara says you never saw joy unless you participated in Simchas Pesach Shueva. What's going on here? Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God says, Nesaku lefonai mayim b'chag. They pour water for me before on Sukkot. And Kedei she yizbarechu lachem gashmei shana, so that I will bless the rains for you. Now, this is also an answer to Bob. It is human behavior that affects the way the agricultural process proceeds. Okay? And the Amr Lefonai Rosh Hashanah, and God says to humanity, recite before me on Rosh Hashanah, Malchios, Zichronos, and Shofros, the 3 sections of the Shmona, the Musaf Shmona Esrei on Rosh Hashanah. Malchios, why do we say 3 Malchios verses? Kedei shetamlichuni aleichem, because they coronate me, they accept me as their king. Zichronos, why do we say the Zichronos verses? כדי שאלה זיכרונכם לפני לטובה, that we remember what the good God did for Noah, we remember the good God did for the Avos, and we get brownie points because we're their descendants. The comma, and with what do you coronate God and do you remind him of our ancestors? The shofar. So we say the shofar verses. So we raise the issue of a shofar, and a shofar is like the key symbol of Rosh Hashanah. We're learning Gemara Rosh Hashanah. So Amar Rebbe Abuhu, Lama Tikin the shofar shel ayil. The Mishnah later on will say that almost every animal, save a cow, that has a horn, could be carved into a shofar. But why is it taka preferable to use a ram's horn? Amar HaKadosh Baruch Hu, God says, to go lifon a shofar shel ayil. There's a pasuk that says, blow a ram's horn. Why? Kedei she'ezkor lochem akedas Yitzchak ben Abraham, you'll cause me to reflect on these akedetem atzmechem lefonai, and I'll give every Jew brownie points, so to speak, as if he personally would be willing to sacrifice himself for my sake. And we know through history, Jews have been willing to do that. We also know the Akedah is at the beginning of davening, which everybody skips. I was once told by Reverend, what?
I don't say.
Oh, good for you. You get brownie points for doing an Akedah. But I was once told by Rev. Reuven Feinstein that the reason it's there is because we are going to be going out into the world. We're going to be given various temptations in business where we go for lunch. Then, the kosher mishpat issues if we're at work for a living. And we should remember that we're willing to give up our lives for the Rabbanu Shalom, that Yitzchak, not Avraham, is the key to the story in the daily recitation. And therefore, if I'm willing to give up my life, certainly I'm willing to give up the Hebrew national hot dog or the stealing a few bucks. That's the function of the Akedah in the davening. So
You're equating the two.
When
Hebrew
you're
national
retired,
with
you don't have to say what?
You're not equating the Hebrew national with stealing money, are you? You're not equating that.
Well, it's not kosher, so I'm saying they're both aveiros, and they're both you can justify. I took a couple of pencils from the office. What's the big deal? I ate something that's stam kosher, not glatt kosher. What's the big deal? And so to that extent, I am equating. I'm not posketing.
Okay.
All right. The Omer Reb Yitzchak. So Reb Yitzchak, now we have a whole string. Reb Yitzchak, Lama Taikin. Lama Taikin? Why do we blow the shofar? Rachmana Omer Taku. The pasuk says blow the shofar. How can you ask that question? Ela Lama Meirin. The Ian. Mar'i. Mar'i.
Miriam.
All right, whatever, however it's pronounced. Why do we blow specifically a teruah? Marian, blowing a truma, Rachmana Omer, Zichron Trua. Blow a trua. Ella, Lama Taikin Umarin, Kishehem Yeshvit. We said a moment ago that the shofar blasts are associated with the Musaf Shmona Esrei. In Nusach Sfard, they blow periodically through the Shmona Esrei, symbolizing the end of each section. That's recently been adopted by many Ashkenazic shuls, including here. That's the real blowing. The blowing before, which is called miyushav, seated, even though we stand. But that's not part of the Seder as originally designed. It was supposed to be in the Shemona Esrei. Why do we do that? Why do we blow early? Turn the page. Toikin umariin kishehem imdin, and then again we repeat in Shemona Esrei when we're standing. Why do we do all that? Kedei la'arvev Satan, to mess Satan up. Satan's going to come and say, these Jews are blowing the shofar. Do you know what lowlives they are to God? And he's going to do that before we even get to Shemona Esrei, because we blew the shofar early. And to extend this, we blow all through Elul for the same reason, that Satan will use up all his arguments before we get to the Yom Hadin. Another thing, the Yom Reb Yitzchak, a third, I guess, memra from Reb, second, whatever. Kol shana she'en toikin lo b'schilasa. Anytime, now this does not mean Shabbos, okay? This means if you choose not to go to shul, it's too long a walk, it's raining, whatever, and they don't blow the shofar in the parking lot, and you miss altogether hearing the shofar at the beginning of the year, Mari'in loch b'soifa. The tradition was, we don't do this anymore, but when a fast day is proclaimed, because there's no rain, whatever the tinus was, they would announce it with shofars and chatzotzras, with trumpets and shofars. So if you don't do what you're supposed to do and hear the shofar in Rosh Hashanah, God will fix you. You'll have to have tinison through the year, and you'll hear the shofar through the end of the year. Okay? So why my timer? What is the rationale for that? The law Satan, because we didn't blow it on Rosh Hashanah, we didn't confuse Satan. He made cogent arguments, and God judged against us, and we're punished by having droughts, which is the main driving force of volative fast days. Bob, that also was in response to that the weather is often a result of our behavior.
Right.
Okay, and the weather directly relates to the crops. The Omer Rabbi Yitzchak, he had another memra from Rabbi Yitzchak. Kol shana shirasha b'tchilasa, any year that's lousy, that things are going poorly, at the beginning of that year, and Jews pray with more fervor, and they present themselves to God as being needy. Mis asheres b'sayfai. God hears those prayers, and he'll make that year turn around and actually be prosperous by the end. Shenema me reshis hashana. Now, literally, the word means at the beginning of the year. But me reshis kisiv, it doesn't have an aleph. And therefore, the ad acheris, and then it also says to the end of the year, sofa acheris, sofa sheyesh lo acheris. It'll be a year where there is an end. If you don't make it till next Rosh Hashanah, that's a year that for you did not conclude. So by praying fervently on Rosh Hashanah, Mistama, we will make it to the end of that year. The Omer Reb Yitzchak, another memra from Reb Yitzchak, Ein danin es ha'adam ela lefisha asa al isa sha'a. God takes into account all sorts of circumstances, and he judges you for who and what and why you are now. when Leuven and I were learning, there are these movies that talk about a time machine, and would you go back in time and shoot Adolf Hitler when he was a teenager, Mustami, you'd save 6 million Jews. So this is, God would say no. Because when he was a teenager, Adolf Hitler hadn't killed a bunch of Jews yet. He's not Chayav Misa. And we see that, lest you think my example is a little excessive. Shenemar ki shama Elokim es kol hanar ka'asher hu sham. He heard Yishmael when Yishmael was tired and hungry under the bush and thirsty, and God provided food and water for Yishmael. Now, we have had, as a Jewish people, trouble with the Arabs lo these many eons. And God certainly knew what was going to be with the descendants of Yishmael, but he rescued him. So my example is not so far-fetched. Another memra, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, more. Shlosha Devorim Maskirin Avonosov Shel Adam. There are 3 behaviors which cause God to remember all the bad things you've done and to realize you're Chayav Misa and to knock you off, so to speak. The Elohain, these are those behaviors. Kir Netui. Literally, it means a leaning wall. But more broadly, do not put yourself in a position of danger. There are people would learn out you can't go skydiving because of this concept. Because if you're Chayav Misa B'dei Shemayim, you climb this tall ladder, you give God a chance to push you off. So you do not put yourself in danger. The Iyun Tefillah, meaning your prayer. What's wrong with that? So what it means is you say to God, I want a bright new red bicycle. And you get home from shul that morning and there's no Amazon package with a bright new red bicycle. And you say, God doesn't listen to my prayers. God, if you have that attitude, God Taka won't listen to your prayer. Din al Chaveiro. And turning in your fellow, not only to a human authority, but to God, to complain. Schwartz talks in the back of the shul all through davening, I can't concentrate. Naming Schwartz when you say that to God is not a good thing. You could say, Rabban Shalom, help us not talk during davening, but pointing your finger at Schwartz or Abramowitz or Cohen, God will point the finger at you. Okay? The Omer Rebbe Chanan, as Rebbe Chanan points out, Kol ha'maiser din al chaveru, anytime a man points a finger at his neighbor, hu ne'enash chila. God points his finger at him, kavi, and he gets punished. The Tamer Sorayel Avraham said to Avraham, there is a translation of that, and the Medrash bid for her, and he had to cry for her. The Medrash explains that originally they both should have died proximate to each other, but she predeceased him by 37 years because she complained about him to God. Okay, and that's sorrow. Allah is kama v'kama, people like us. We're not supposed to complain to God. Okay, another Rebbe Yitzchak. Omer Rabbi Yitzchak, there are four types of behavior. We just had before three types of behavior that lead to calamity. Now we're going to get four types of behavior that cause God to tear up a severe decree. Elohim, these are they. Staka, charity. Now, charity here does not mean paying your shoulders or endowing the library at a university. Charity here is very narrowly defined as giving sustenance to an ani. And it's a case of mida keneged mida. If you act to keep him alive, God will act to keep you alive. There's a story about Rabbi Akiva's daughter. There are a whole bunch of stories in the Torah, in the broadly speaking in Torah, of how tzedakah literally saved people's lives. And this means, so the dollar you put into Pishka is the thing keeping you going, not the $500,000 check you wrote for the building. We're going to say that. That's going to say that right now. Okay, but the next one is tza'aka, fervent prayer, literally crying. The third is shinoi Hashem, changing your name. And the fourth is shinoi maisa, changing your behavior. These are the four things that get the decree torn up. And we know we change people's names when they're very sick. People do tshuva, they change their behavior, etc., etc. Now we're going to go through it. Diksiv, udstaka, tatzil mimavas. Charity rescues you from death. Tza'aka, crying out. Diksiv, v'yitz'aku el Hashem b'tzar lahem, omim tzoko sehem yotziem. They cried out to God in their pain, and he took them out of their matzah. So he changed their circumstance. Shinu Hashem, we have that. Diksiv, and again we're going to Sarah. When she was Sarai, she could not have children. When God changed her name to Sarah, she was able to have children. Diksiv Sarai ishtecha lo sikra. You should not call your wife Sarai anymore. Es shemo Sarai. Your name isn't going to be Sarai. Ki Sarah shema. Her name will be Sarah. Uksiv, and the very next pasuk says, Obeirachti oisah, I will bless her. V'gam nasati mimenu lecha bein, and you will be able to father a child through her. So we see name changes were. Maisa, Shinui Maisa, we know that is the case from Yonah. Diksiv, V'yar Elokim esma asehem, God saw that the people of the city of Nineveh changed their evil ways. Uksiv, and it says, Vayinochem Elokim al hara'a asher diver lasos lohem lo osa. And God saw that they weren't doing evil anymore, and so he said, I will back off from the decree of destroying them, and I won't do it. So you see that change of behavior is effective. Yeshamrim, others will say there's actually a fifth behavioral change that can be effective. Afshini makom, changing your place, changing where you sit in shul, changing where you live. Diksiv, it says, V'yomer Hashem el Avram, Lech lecho me'artzecha. Abraham, get up and get out of this place. So the Gemara, the Hadar, the next pasuk says, "V'yaseh lecha l'goy gadol," I'll make you into a great nation. So the people who do not agree that shinui makom works says you can't use that pasuk for shinui makom. That pasuk, what is the understanding of that pasuk? The guy's leaving Ur Chaldea. and he's going to Canaan. And Canaan is Eretz Yisrael. That has Kedushas Aretz. The Idach, the other point of view that does not accept Shinu Makom, Hahu Zechusa de Eretz Yisrael, the Ahanyole.
Right.
It was the fact that he would be living in Israel, not the fact that he moved, that would be beneficial. Okay, another member from Rabbi Yitzchak, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Chayav Adam Lekavil Pnei Rabbo Bereg. A person is obligated to the extent possible to visit his Rebbe on Jewish holidays. Shenemar, and the Eshes Shunanis, the lady, she is going to the prophet. Madua ad haleches alav. Why did you go to the prophet now? Hayom lo chodesh v'lo Shabbos. It's not Rosh Chodesh. It's not Shabbos. So if you have to visit, but if she had gone on Rosh Chodesh, they wouldn't have asked, "Why are you going?" So that's that you should go on Rosh Chodesh. Halachas kama v'kama on Yontif. Klal the B'chodesh v'Shabbos iboilahu lamezo. So we see that she should have gone and would have gone on Rosh Chodesh and Shabbos were it possible. The Omer Reb Yitzchak, the last thing that Reb Yitzchak talks about over here, Chayav Adam latayher es atzmo beregel. A person is supposed to go to the mikveh prior to Yom Tov. Shenemar. Ubeniv lo som lo sigau. Do not touch a corpse of an animal that wasn't shechted properly. Do not touch nevela. Tanya nami hachi. We also have a brisa that says ubeniv lo som lo sigau. Do not touch a carcass. Yachol hi Yisrael musharin al Maga Nevela. Don't, this is a question. Is it so that Stam Jews are cautioned against touching a carcass? Talmud Loimer, Omer al HaKohanim b'nei Aaron. Say it to the Kohanim, the children of Aaron. They're not allowed to touch a carcass. B'nei Aaron musharim. The warning is to B'nei Aaron. B'nei Yisrael ein musharim. They are not warned about touching your carcass. Ela dvarim kal v'chomer. But we learn out from here a kal v'chomer. Umat tuma chamura. If there are different degrees of tuma. A dead human being is the highest level of tuma. A dead animal is a tuma kala, a lower level of tuma. Ma tuma chamura kohanim musharim b'Yisrael einan musharim. Kohanim are warned about being involved with dead bodies, human bodies, except of course a meis mitzvah. But regular Jews, we have the Chaver Kadisha. It's a mitzvah to be involved with the dead body. Tuma Kala, a lower level Tuma, Kol Shekain, that if only the Kohanim weren't, certainly the regular Jews are not. Ella Mal Talmud Lomer. So what is the point of telling us? Nivlas lo tigau. Do not touch a corpse. When are we not supposed to touch a corpse? Beregel. If you went to the mikveh 3 hours before Yom Kippur, and then you touched a piece of non-kosher meat, you canceled out the mikveh going. So it's only after you go to the mikveh on Yom Tov that this is applicable. And by the way, the Shastachak Gadol Ma'od, like during COVID and the like, taking a shower with 9 kavin, a 5-minute shower, b'diavad could be considered as if you went to the mikveh if it's really impossible to do so. All right. So coming back now, and we're talking about Rosh Hashanah and being judged. Omar Rav Kus Pedai. think I said it right. Omer Rav Yochanan. Shlosha Svarim Neftachin Me Rosh Hashanah. God opens 3 ledgers on Rosh Hashanah. Echad Shel Rishayim. One is a big, thick phone book full of evil people, bad people. Gemurim, totally bad people. The Echad Shel Tzadikim Gemurim, a little tiny, skinny little pamphlet. Okay. The Echad Shel Beinanim, and one which is the biggest of all of average people. Now we'll see in a minute here what average people means. That on the heavenly scale, their bad is exactly equal to their good. Now that we don't know how to make that judgment. Somebody could be Michal Shabbos, somebody could be eat treif, but he organized the train of children to go to England, and that person is considered a tzaddik gamor because his good vastly outweighs all his apparent bad. So we don't do this judgment, but God does. Tzadikim gemorim nichtavim v'nechmotomin la'alter l'chayim. The super righteous are both judged and sealed on Rosh Hashanah l'chayim. Now we'll see in a minute that does not mean that they stay alive for the year. That means le'olam haba. We'll see that in a little bit. Rishayim gemurim nichtavin v'nechtamin la'alter l'misa. The truly bad guys are judged and sealed on Rosh Hashanah for death, meaning not for Chai Olam Haba. Beinanim Tuluyim b'yomdim me Rosh Hashanah ad Yom Kippurim. The average people are judged starting a process on Rosh Hashanah, and the process extends through Yom Kippur. Chassidim would add even until Hashanah Rabbah. Now, Zacho Nichtavin L'chayim, if for some reason over this 10-day process they're judged L'tov, then they get Chayim. Lo Zacho Nichtavin L'misa, if they don't make the gray cut, they get Misa. So that creates a lot of real problems. We don't really have time to go into it. If the judgment is for last year, how doing one more, how do giving tzedakah now? How can I toss a penny on the scales from last year? It's already this year. So we have to go back to the way for the various ways people can change the judgment. If I sincerely do tshuva, if I change my maisios, then God may now consider my bad things to be good things. I mean, we have a whole bunch of Torah on it, but it's not such a simple issue. V'lo zakon nichtavin l'misa. If they don't make the grade, they get misa. Omer Rav Avin, Mikra. What is the meaning of the pasuk where Moshe says, "If you do not forgive the Jews from the Maisagel, erase me from the Torah, I don't want to be part of anything to do with you, Kaviyachol. Yamachu me sefer chayim, take me out of you, erase me from your book of life. The im tzadikim al yikasevu, and I do not want to be written down in the book of the righteous." That's a pasuk. Yamachu me sefer, erase from the book. Zeh Seifrin Shel Rishoyim Gemurim. That's the book of the total bad guys. Chayim, Zeh Sifrin Shel Tzadikim. That's the book of the good guys. The Im Tzadikim Al Yichosevu, Zeh Sifrin Shel Beinanim. That's the book where they don't get put in one of the other two books yet until the final judgment is made. Reb Nachman bar Yitzchak Mehacha, he says the same thing from a different pasuk. Im ein mecheni no misifran asher kasavta. Erase me from the book you've written. Macheni no, erase me now. That's the book of the wicked. Sifran shel Rishayim. Misifrecha, that's the Sifran shel Tzadikim, the book of the good guys. Asher Kosavta, the book that you write in. Sifran shel Beinanim, that's the average people. Okay, so now we're going to go into another viewpoint on personal judgment. Tanya, we have a brisa. Beis Shammai Omrim, Shalosh Kitas Hein Liyom Hadin. There are 3 cohorts that human beings are lumped together on Rosh Hashanah, on the Yom Hadin. Achas Shel Tzadikim Gemurim, the small group of really good guys. Achas Shel Rishayim Gemurim, the larger group of completely bad guys. The Achas Shel Beinanim, in the book of average people who are 50-50. Tzadikim Gemurim Nichtavin V'Nichtamin La'alter L'chai Olam. The people that are completely righteous are written and sealed for eternal life, not corporeal life. Rishoyim Gemurim Nichtamin Nichtamin La'alter L'Gehenim. They go straight, they are destined at the end of their years to go straight to hell. Shenem Rabim Afar, they will sleep in the dust. Yitza'u, and they will wake up again. Eila l'chayolim, that's the people who will get olam haba. V'eila charafos lidroin olam, and the other ones who have busha, have charpa, they will sleep forever. Beinanim Yordin the Gehenim, but the good guys descend into Gehenim, Mitzaftzifin, and they cry out in anguish in hell, V'oilim, and they come back up, and they get Olam Haba, Shenemar, and it says in the pasuk, V'hevesi es shalishis ba'esh. I will 1/3 into the fire, tziraftim v'tzarif, and they will be purified in the fire. Ketzarif as a kesef, like the way silver is purified by a silversmith. B'chantim b'bechain, and I will clarify it, refine it, kizahav, as zahav, like I do with gold. Yikore b'shmi, they cry out to me, va'ani and oisai, and I will answer them. And we'll stop there. I apologize for taking so long.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Excellent.
Okay, I think possibly Kenny should be back tomorrow. If not, Ruben will give the shir as he. So
Oh, man.
he told me originally the 26th. Today's 25th, right? So tomorrow's the 26th. So based on what he told me initially, but who knows? Okay, but in any event, if he's not back, we will continue to do the best we can to cover the ground. And at least we're not falling behind. Okay, you coming with me? Let's go.
What time? Morning, 11:30?
No, I'm not going to the doctor.
Careful, you're in the wire.
So we can do 12:30.
Bob,
I'm gonna,
Yeah.
Wake up,
ride home with you?
Yes.
Dr. Prince.